Okay, so we'll start with scissors. You're gonna need obviously a whole arrangement of scissors. These ones are just traditional, whatever, sewing scissors. They're not tailor scissors or more specific fabric scissors like this ones. These ones are for when I need to cut smaller things. They're not too heavy. I have to be very careful with my wrists because they get sore very, very quickly. Then I have a bunch of smaller, tinier scissors for when I'm cutting yarn or when I'm sewing or I'm knitting. So I have smaller scissors for that. These ones are the ones I keep by the sewing machine. They are thread snips and they're just really quickly. You don't have to have the whole bonking scissors just to cut threads from the serger or something. I just can make small snips. I don't use them to cut fabric. I only use them to cut thread. These one are the same thing. They're just a little bit more fancy. They're heavier. So when I have a lot of things to be cutting through, like when I do quilting or a lot of embroidery and I'm going to be cutting a lot of threads, I use these ones on my hands. Then we have these ones. These are bigger scissors, size 10. These are the ones I normally use to cut fabric. Again, they're not tailor scissors, but they're much heavier. And obviously, I only use them for cutting fabric. Then I have quite a few different cutters, like this one for cutting leather and to trim the leather. And then I have a rotary cutter for when I'm cutting a lot of strips of fabric. I use it with the self-healing mat. So I put the self-healing mat on the surface. I put the fabric or whatever I'm going to cut. And then I use this one. And it's really good, really sharp. It's a 45 millimeter by LDH, which is the same one as this. And I have a few different ones for cutting leather, for cutting paper. This is the one I just use for fabric. So these are some of my cutting tools. These are all my hemostats or forceps. I use them all the time. I use them so much, I don't know what I would do without them. I use them to, these big ones, I use them to either bring wool into really long body parts or to turn inside out dull body parts that are very large, very long. These are the longer ones I have. These ones measure from tip to bottom 8 inches. And then I have these smaller ones. I use these ones most regularly as I'm stuffing or doing things because they're smaller. And then I use these ones for smaller dolls. And then I use these ones for when I'm dealing with very tiny things. I need to pinch needles out as I'm sewing. I also have different pliers for the same purpose, but it depends on what's closer to me or what it's more acceptable. So hemostats are really important. They're very helpful where I'm turning colors or anything that needs to be reversed. I need to hold an end and then take it out. They're really helpful because they open and then they have this locking mechanism. So you are not putting any strain on your wrist and you're hopefully not tearing the fabric by securing it from a good end. So hemostats, really helpful. Now measuring tools, I use many different ones, of course. This is a sewing gauge and it has a slider. I use this when I'm sewing to help me see seam allowances and things like that. I use it a lot when I'm embroidering, when I'm placing things symmetrically on the face to see if I've embroidered the eyes the same size on both ends. And this is basically the same thing. It's just a little bit more fancy. It's really helpful when you are needle felting, especially body parts, as it helps you take accurate measurements of legs, of arms, of feet, etc. Then I have these transparent quilting rulers, which I use a lot, and I have in many different lengths and sizes, and of course measuring tape. I go through these ones quite a lot because I stretch them out and I break them and I write on them. And then I have these little small very cheap plastic rulers that are mainly in centimeters, and they help me a lot when I'm designing clothes. Speaking of designing clothes, I have these small, very small French curves that I use when I'm drawing patterns. I used to just like draw them by hand, but the curves were not always right. And so now I am literally addicted to using this one. I really love drafting patterns just so that I get to use the rulers. For knitting and crochet, of course, you're going to need so many needles, different needles and tools. These are circular needles. These are my favorite to work with. Yes, I especially love wooden tips. I also love metal ones, but these ones are kinder on my hands. This is a kit that a dear friend gave me. These are very small double-pointed needles, and these are the ones I use. I think they're made out of carbon, so they're supposed to not break very easily. I use these ones for knitting small socks, small shoes, small boots, small hats, collars if I need to knit them in the round. Then I have cable needles, which I don't use very often, but every now and then they come in handy. Different sizes of crochet hooks with this kind of like nice, more ergonomic handle. I really like my bamboo ones as well. This is really helpful when I'm knitting a very long shawl, especially for me, but also for the dolls. It's just a row counter. So every time you finish a row, you move it so you know where you are in the pattern. Big eye blunted tip needles for weaving in tails and for sewing pieces together. And then a variety of stitch markers so that you can know where you are in your pattern. These ones are by Coco Knits. They're metal and they're really helpful. So for stuffing, I use mainly 3 tools, obviously a measuring tape and sometimes a digital scale to see if I'm using enough wool, but I use a wool wand, which my husband made for me. I have about 12 of these in many different lengths and sizes. These ones help me to roll the wool really evenly so that I can stuff body parts. Then I use this metal knitting needle to push wool into hands or feet as I'm working. I can use this one too, but I am really used to using this metal needle. And then I use, like I mentioned, the hemostats to bring in pieces of wool inside the roll of wool, or to stuff in thumbs when I'm using really long body pattern pieces. Okay, so for felting, lots of different tools, of course, is a wool teaser. So you use it to kind of like lift up wool or to hold it down as you're felting really close to it and you don't want to put your fingers too close to the needle. Sometimes I use a piece of foam. This is, I believe it's 2-inch foam. I just cut it in half because it was too big a piece, and I use it every now and then when I'm needle felting feet or hands for the mannequins. And this is I made it myself with 2 tea towels a long time ago. This is my cushion for felting. So I have most of my colored needles here. You can hardly see the color, but they're all the Wispic, well, not all of them, but most of the Wispic color needles that I use every now and then. Different needles, thicker needles than I wouldn't use these ones normally for sewing, but there's some of my doll making needles. These ones are too thick. I use them when I'm making doll mattresses or stuff like that. And just some sewing needles that I've put in here. I have my 2 clover 3-pent needles, and then I have this one which holds 4, and it's very wonky. I've had it since 2008, but every now and then I still like it because I can push in the needles as far as I want to, whereas with this ones I can only go about 1 inch. So I like this one for that reason, which is also helpful when you are just felting large parts of of wool, like the back of the head, the top of a head or a belly, and it felts more flatly. So I use it for that. It's all loaded with 36 needles. Those are my needles of preference. The red tops or Wispic 36 gauge felting needles. Now, these things are some of my favorite things as well. They are pressing hams and pressing rolls, and I use them so much when I am pressing, because I love to press the doll clothing as I go. I love pressing collars, hats, curves, pockets, you name it. I normally use this really big one for when I'm sewing for myself, but I've also used it on the dolls. Sometimes I pin pieces. If I'm doing a long seam by hand, I pin it to this big roll, and then it holds it for me as I sew it. I can hold it taut. These ones are the ones I use most for the dolls. I use them a lot when I'm shaping sleeve heads or hats. And this is a pressing needle, so you put it over your hand and you hold it against the iron, right, to like press certain areas that you wouldn't be able to use with these ones. If you go to a sewing store, you are most likely going to find them in huge human size. Now, some of my other tools are for installing grommets or snaps or you name it. There's also for the actual like grommets, the metal eyelets. So one's a punch, so you can make a hole in the leather or whatever fabric you're using. And this one helps you to bend the edges over this little it has a spring, so when you slam it, and of course you're going to need a mallet, right, so that you don't destroy the top of the grommet. This leather hunches to make wider holes than the eyelet tools I have. So I have this one. This one is for a specific size of metal eyelet. It's just a one size fit all, and it also works really well. So